Okay, during this march, when Howe and Cornwallis were outflanking the American position at Birmingham Meeting House, they came a couple of obstacles in the area. They came across some obstacles. As we were saying before, down at Jeffrey's Ford, which is about 50 yards to my right, they turned and made a sharp right turn onto Birmingham Road. In front of me is Birmingham Road in front of me. Now this position's interesting. Right here where we're standing, the light cavalry was ahead of the army. Now what they did, they didn't know if they were going to be outflanked. Basically, Howe and Cornwallis knew that General Washington had a Maxwell's light infantry. These guys were in the woods. They would have shot at you. They didn't know where they were. They had no idea if Washington was in this area. They didn't have any inflicting reports. They just had a map from the spy that told them where to go. They didn't know if Washington's army was along these ridges, if they were in front of them, how far in the distance they could see. So before the army was across Jeffrey's Ford, the light cavalry were inspecting the area. They were in this area. They were up on the hills and embankments. Now, like I was saying, this position here is interesting. It's very significant. It's because when the army got to this point, they were notified. The cavalry went back and said there's a defile along the way. Now, this defile is interesting. Now, what we're standing here in front of is the Birmingham Road. If this road was, if they were halted on Birmingham Road and the place where I'm staying, the whole army of Howe's flanking maneuver could have been held up the whole day from this position where I'm standing. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. Where I'm standing is there's a ridge. I'm going to pan over and I'll show you the ridge off to my left. There's a ridge off to my right. Now these are hills, just like there would be defenses like at Chad's Ford. Now this defile starts at Birmingham Road and goes about 1,000 paces, as the British said, up to the north along Birmingham Road. Now after this defile, these hills on either side end, it's a flat plateau. You could see for miles. It would have been farmland, but they didn't farm this area. The reason why it wasn't farmed is because it was hilly, it was rocky, there was trees here, it was a woods. So basically, the cavalry came here. They said, they reported back to Howe and Cornwallis, and it was miraculous. They didn't know. They were very astonished why this position was not protected. This was an opportunity, if Washington knew about the flanking maneuver, that they could have been here. 100 men in this area could have held up the whole British onslaught for at least half a day. Now, the reason for this is because the road in back of me goes to Turk's Head. Now this road, you can't outflank this position. If they put men on top of this hill, you would be able to put withering fire on the British from both angles, from my left and also on my right. All they had to do is be stationed on the hills around me. The British had nowhere to go. They couldn't outflank this position. It was difficult. There was woods and there was a ridge that went along this area. Now, as I said before, these hills are just in this general area. It's a small little confined space, but it's a defile if it was protected. If Washington knew about the flanking maneuver before Jeffrey's Ford, before they got to the ford, or if he knew that, he could have sent troops, most likely from Sullivan or Sterling's division, down the Birmingham Road to enforce this position. As a military commander, you could see this area. You could see the protections. You could see the hills that you could protect here. Now I'm going to pan around and I'll explain some of the hills and the terrain. Now, as you can see in the distance where my vehicle is, there's a defile. It goes on top of this ridge up in the distance. Just like behind you, there was woods behind me where the camera was panned. Up here also, this is a ridge that will probably extend almost about 300 yards or longer. It could go longer along this ridge. If Washington, like I said, knew that they were outflanking the position, they could have had men stationed right here where I'm standing, and they could have halted the advance of Howe and Cornwallis for at least half a day. Now, unfortunately, this position, like the positions all the way from Kennett Square to Birmingham in 926, were they didn't have soldiers there. There was nobody at all there. They did not defend the area. They didn't know that they were coming. They had conflicting reports, and this area where I'm standing was not protected by the Continental Forces. The ramifications were that Howe had a clear line. The Osborne's Ridge, from where I'm standing, is about a half a mile to my east. They had a clear path. Now, a little general area, tidbit about this area, was that during this time in this defile, that the Army was advancing faster than the baggage, because they had to cross Jeffries Ford. It takes a little longer for the wagons to go across. The drivers might have to actually help push the wagons across the ford. It might take longer, maybe 2 hours. So basically, the Army is crossing. They're on foot. The Army went through this defile, which is about, like I said, about 1,000 paces. It's probably around 500 yards long. Now, as it empties out on top of this ridge, it opens up into farmland again. The Army had to stop up on top of the hill and wait for their baggage to come and follow the Army. So they sat down. They took their hats off. It was extremely hot that day. They probably took a drink from the stream behind me. There's water here. They filled their canteens. They probably, it was very hot. There's accounts of the day. There were wool uniforms. British soldiers and Americans also had wool. They had deerskin pants. They had boots. They had gaiters. The British Army were well dressed. They had good uniforms. But these uniforms were hot. They were restricted. It was a very warm day on September 11th. There's accounts of 4 or 5 men dropping dead on this march because they couldn't make it. It was hot. They had to stop about 700 yards to the north. Now, what they did is they lined up in ranks because they knew that just right up the road, they would have been on Osborne's Hill. Howe halted the Army for the first time. He stopped the Army twice on this march. Waited for the caravan, waited for the the ammunition wagons to come by and meet up with his Army. At that time, they refreshed. Like I said, this defile that they went through, if it was protected by Washington, it would have been a good defense, an excellent defense. But it wasn't, and to this day, they don't understand why. And there's reasons. The spy map, this spy that we're talking about, must have been on the American side. He knew that these fords weren't protected. He couldn't just know where the Army would go because Washington could have stationed troops down here. He had to know before September 11th about the Army's movements. This spy knew the area. This spy must have been an American loyalist. He changed into a British loyalist, and because of this, this spy knew a lot before the battle. He knew that Washington wasn't stationed further than Britain's Ford or Jones's Ford. There was some cavalry near Jones's Ford also. So because of all this, they marched on 926 in Birmingham and left this position where we're standing undefended.